Hello, welcome to another episode of Field of Screams podcast. Today we'll be talking about the Korean movie Ghost Station. Now I had some extra time the other night and I was going through Prime Video and I just noticed this little movie here. It's a little Korean movie called Ghost Station. I didn't look too much into it. I mean, I've watched Korean movies before and I think they do a very good job with horror movies. Train to Busan is one that I recall. I mean, I'm a very big fan of that. I plan to cover it one day. But I'm just kind of watching this, and I'm like, Train to Busan was pretty good. I'll give this movie a shot. So this movie here, it's about a young reporter named Tae-hee. And if I mispronounce these, I'm sorry. But a young reporter named Tae-hee. She goes and reports on a suicide incident that happened on the train tracks, and then ghostly occurrences start happening. Now this movie, I think it has a pretty solid story overall. The acting is pretty good in it. As far as it being super scary, I didn't think it was that scary of a movie. I think if there was one department where this film lacks in, it's just in how scary it is. I mean, the scares kind of remind me of a typical Blumhouse film. Sometimes it almost seems like they're like pop-up, like you're going through a haunted house and you're going around the corner and something's going to pop out and it's not going to be that scary, but it's probably going to be loud and, it's set to startle you. I think that's how I could see this film. This movie has some elements of like incantation, where there's like a curse going on. And it's also a found footage movie. So if you're a fan of found footage, if you're a fan of foreign films, go check this movie out. I didn't want to hit spoilers right away because I'm guessing this movie probably isn't the most popular movie out there. And if you want to just kind of see, what it was about and if you should check it out, if that's in your wheelhouse, go check it out because I'm about to get into spoiler territory. So that was your warning. Here we go. So this movie's beginning, I would say this is like one of the scariest scenes in the movie, actually. There's a guy sitting at a train station. He sees this lady kind of wandering around. He thinks that she's drunk. He's texting a friend about it. And then she starts acting like very weird and very possessed. The way she like hinges her body, puts her hair over her eyes, it is creepy 101. Watching the way this lady was walking in the beginning, I was kind of like, oh man, like I'm in for a good movie here. I was excited. Again, like her hair covering her face, like it's the typical. Like, I don't know, like it almost reminds me of The Ring, and that always creeps people out. And this lady was doing this. She was like bending backwards, and then she starts hitting her head on the wall. Really just like unnerving stuff. And then this guy sticks his head out of like the sliding door. He thinks he sees this guy on the tracks. I think that's what it was. Then the door shuts and it like decapitates him. And then like you really don't hear much about this scene after. And then it kind of like flash forwards and you go to like the suicide incident. A guy walked out in front of a train and, he was hit. Once you get that information, we meet up with the main character, Tae-hee. And Tae-hee, she is down on her luck and her boss is one mean lady. And I mean, like, when I say down on her luck, like, she did this interview, like, she's a reporter, she did the story about a girl of the summer, or like it girl of the summer. Well, it turned out that girl was actually a man. It was a cross-dresser. And her boss like chews her out for that. She's like, oh, you thought you had the it girl of the summer. It's actually a guy. And like Taehee's like, oh, how was I supposed to know? And so Tae-hee like goes and rants to her friends. She's telling her friends how her boss is all mad because she thought they had the it girl. It was a cross-dresser. Her friend Seung Yoon, he was like, oh, I definitely thought it was a girl. But anyways, did our friend here tell you that he witnessed a suicide? And he's just like very direct, matter of fact about it. Like, isn't like quiet. And like, yeah, their friend U1, I think that's what his name is. It's U1. He saw the suicide go down. He was working, and they saw something on the monitors. He ran out. He saw the guy standing on the tracks, saw him get hit. And like the other friend's just like, yeah, he totally saw it. He was a witness. Like he could do an interview for you, Tahi. And Tahi's like, oh, like, would you consider that? And she's like, oh, but we would need like another witness. And like the whole thing that interests Tahi, because at first when they mentioned the suicide by train, Tahi's like, oh, that would be way too depressing. And Yuwon's like, yeah, but we also saw like a little kid on the tracks too. And that was weird. And this instantly puts Tahi like on the path, like, oh, we gotta cover the story. So, like she said she needs the other witness. So they go to the coroner. The coroner also saw a little kid. And Tahi's hot on the path, to figure this all out. So, like, this movie is basically like this mystery. Like, something's afoot. Like, there's like weird kids that just kind of sprout out of nowhere. And you're wondering why this is all happening. They're hinting at like a well. And like these people, they start getting like these weird scratches on their hands and their face. And basically Tahi, like, she's uncovering this story, trying to save her job because her boss is always mad at her. There's a point to where Tahi goes to interview the conductor of the train that hit the guy. And she goes, and you see her interviewing the conductor. He's answering these questions. He's acting pretty weird. And then, like, she releases a story. The story's a huge hit. And I mean, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, the dynamics of her office as a reporter. Because, like, there's, like, her and all of her coworkers. And then there's, like, this guy. And I think this guy is, like, in charge of her. Maybe, like, a supervisor. I'll just call him the supervisor. But then her boss is the lady who's always mad at her. That's always calling her. And when she puts out the story of the interview, like, it's a big hit. And her supervisor is, like, always totally stoked on her work. He's always like, oh, you're doing so good. Like, you're going to break records. And there's a point to where he, like, brings in a cake and she's like, it's not even my birthday. And he's like, no, it's a cake to celebrate the 300,000th view. And she's like, oh, and the supervisor's just like stoked. But then the boss like storms in and she's like, Tahi, I want to talk to you. And she's like, oh, okay. Like, everyone else is stoked on me, but I don't know what your deal is. And Tahi goes and talks to the boss, and the boss is like, that conductor committed suicide a day before you supposedly interviewed him. And like, it kind of made me laugh. I'm like, man, this girl is down on her luck. So the boss thinks she's a liar. She's also mad about the guy being the it girl of the summer. And then Tahi's like getting sued because of something she covered. There's a big lawsuit. But soon, like, she gets like another big number on like a story she reports that's related to the suicide. And like, she gets so many views that the boss is like, listen, we'll cover the lawsuit. You don't worry about that. But you go and get the next big story. Well, Tahi, in her investigative practices, she keeps hearing about a well, and she's like, I want to go investigate this well. And she tells her boss, and the boss is like, nah, don't cover the well. That sounds boring to me. Cover something else. And Tahi's like, what the heck? Like, I'm the one doing these big stories here. I should be able to investigate whatever I want. So that's exactly like what she does. Now, all the hallucinations that you see throughout this movie, and people start dropping like flies. But of the hallucinations, like, you see these little kids, and these little kids, they don't have names, they have numbers, and they want you to say the number. And whenever you say the number, that makes you cursed, and that makes you doomed, unless you can pass the curse on to someone else, which they find out later in the movie. Now, before I get to the ending, I will say, because I talk about how this movie's not that scary, I think the number one flaw in this movie, like, there are some scenes where they build up to the suspense, you know something's coming, but it's like this makeup that they put on the people that are possessed or that they're hallucinating, or even the kids. Like, it looks really overdone. You know how sometimes, like, if you go to watch, like, a possession movie and, like, the possessed person's acting a little too crazy and they're literally, like, sprinting up walls and making every object in the house, like, fly, and it kind of just passes that point of believability. That's kind of where this movie goes with the makeup. Like, there were some scenes where I'm like, ooh, this is really creepy. I hope they keep it up. And then, like, this face pops out and it's, like, all scarred and it looks really fake. And I'm kind of like, ah. Like, they should have just left that out. They should have kept them in the shadows. Like, it would have been so much better. And I think that's where this movie kind of falls short. The story with it now this is like the big reveal. Now, the numbers of the kids, basically the background story is, so there was this house. It had a ton of kids there. They were stealing kids for organ harvesting. And this guy put all the kids down into a well. All the kids, their names were numbers. You know, obviously, if you're harvesting organs from kids, you probably don't care a lot about them. You don't give them names, and you give them numbers. And, like, all these kids are down in the well. And there was one girl who made it out, which you end up seeing her later. In the movie, she's, like, one of the cursed people. But she was down in that well, and her little brother, who I guess got to stay up out of the well, he kept panicking and saying that he wanted her out. So the guy looks down and calls out her number. She's able to leave the well. As she's leaving the well, one of the kids says, "Hey, tell him to say my number too. I want to leave the well." And she's like, "Okay." And all the other kids start saying, "Yeah, say my number, say my number." Well, their numbers are never called, and they end up dying. The well that they got placed in, that's where they built the train station. So that's why these kids haunt the train station and curse other people by making them say their number. Now they figure out the only way that they can pass the curse is finding an individual that knows the background to the story, and then they say the number that they are cursed with. And when that person says the number, they now have the curse, and they get the little scars on their hand. You know, they feel it in their throat. Yuan ends up getting cursed, and he doesn't know what to do with it, so he ends up passing the curse to our main character, reporter girl. Which I was kind of shocked, because Yuan was a nice guy throughout the entire film. And he even says on the phone, he's like, "Listen, I just want to live. I'm sorry." And he, like, hangs up. And so, like, but they still tell her how to pass the curse. And, like, once she figures out how to pass the curse, like, you know directly where this movie's going. She marches into her boss's office, and she has a resignation letter. And she's like, "I will resign if you read these numbers." And the boss looks at her, and, you know, the boss is all mean, because the boss is always mean. And she's like, "Well, I can say these numbers," and she says them. And then the main character walks out of the building, smiling, knowing that she cursed her boss. And then you hear the bosses scream, and then the movie's over. Now, this movie was really different with how it ended. Because I didn't know how to feel. I'm like, man, like, there's never really a point in the movie where you hate the kids or you hate the ghost or the demon. Like, you kind of just hate the boss and how crappy she's being. And it totally makes sense for her to be the one that ends up with the curse at the end. Overall, like, I think the story was pretty good. I like the characters in the story. I was interested the whole time. I didn't like the makeup and all that stuff of the cursed people. If they would have done that a little better, I think this movie would have went a long way. With how it ends up, with how it not being very scary, like, I would say this movie ends up just kind of being average, and it's probably forgettable for some people. But I don't know, if you're into Korean horror, or ghost stories, and you like found footage movies, this movie might be up your wheelhouse. Again, I don't think it's bad at all. My only gripe is just the makeup and the cuts and all that stuff. It's well acted. The little girl who gets out of the well, who ends up being the sister, she's cursed as an adult, and it shows her, and she was very creepy, in my opinion. She did a very good job. She'll go from talking and then she'll just scream, and it's just very eerie, and you're like, dude, get away from this crazy lady. The coroner, he's very creepy. He does a great job playing this creepy guy. Yeah, I don't know. It was well acted, and it was a very good story. So, yeah. So that's my review of Ghost Station. If you like this review, and if you're still listening, 1, I appreciate it. And 2, if you want to hear more reviews like this, subscribe so you hear the next one. I'm also covering the Halloween franchise. And I love found footage. I love covering found footage movies. And also feel free to hit that like button. That helps out my channel a ton. It gets these videos out to other people. Comment and tell me what you think of this movie. And yeah, once again, thanks for listening. And until next time.